everybody, and welcome to another live. It's a very sunny, bright day here in London. We had a kind of slightly bizarre 26 degrees Celsius the other day for some weird reason in the middle of, I guess, autumn, but it's nice and sunny. I see lots of the people saying it's not so sunny where they are, so we'll take it while we can. Of course, in a week's time, I will be heading to very sunny, very hot weather, heading off to Las Vegas, which I love, and Palm Springs, which is another great place to be. So more on that later, what implications it has for the live stream to come. So thanks to everybody for joining. Lots of questions coming in, so I won't do too much housekeeping before we get in. Just a reminder, around because it mirrors. There we go. So I'm Gary Bembridge, Channel's Tips for Travelers. This is a live stream, so if you're watching this afterwards, bear in mind that everything that you hear is based on the questions that people ask. The questions will come up, so if you're watching afterwards, you can skip forward to the actual questions and so on. So I can see lots of regulars joining, which is fantastic. Maybe I'll do a few bits of housekeeping. Just a reminder, everybody, if you have a question, write the word question, ideally in capital letters, because it helps me see those very quickly. And a couple of people, I guess, regulars have done that. That was all. So I have a few quick housekeeping things, more just kind of announcements, I guess, than anything else. So this week I caught up with the guys and gals who run the Cruise Globe cruise maps. The reason I want to bring this up is that they have just this week, in fact, the day I went in to see them to catch up and say hello, they have just, if you use the Cruise Globe, which is a free resource where you can input all your cruises, they've just now released the ability to enter cruises pre-2015. So before you could only enter cruises 2015. Of course, just a reminder, so they also have the app now, which is quite cool. So it's quite good. I was able to input my last cruise on. So that's the cruiseglobe.com, completely free. And you can do all cruises now before 2015. If you ever buy anything from them, use the code TFT. You'll get 10% off. And as you know, I often try and do giveaways. Various people approach me with products for giveaways. So I've got these hiking, they're not mine, you won't get mine. They're kind of brand new, hiking boots, shoes, walking shoes. So the giveaway is just sort of launched. I've put a link to that in the notes of this live if you do want to enter, if you're into that and that appeals to you. Or if not, or if you forget and don't kind of remember to go to the notes. If you go to my blog, tipsfortravelers.com, you'll see the article there with the various links to enter. It runs for 3 weeks or so. So those are, I think, all of the announcements. So let's get stuck into the questions. And I'll talk a little bit later about upcoming live streams. Just making the point, it has been over because Emma was there. You might have, those with eagle eyes might have spotted there, but it was the first time I've seen Emma, who was one of the founders of the Cruise Globe, since pre-pandemic. And I think it was probably at some event. I think it was probably like the Wave Awards, which reminds me I probably should post again about the Wave Awards coming up. Anyway, let's get into the questions. So Michael, good to see you there. Can you talk a bit more about trip insurance? What to look for in a policy? Have you ever needed to use it? I remember you mentioning that you buy one policy for a year. So Michael, I get asked about insurance quite often, and I do have it on my sort of to-do list. I'm a little bit reticent in some ways of doing a video because insurance, I'm not obviously an insurance expert, and I am looking to partner with different people, but also it is relatively geographic from what I can see. But I will talk about some of the critical things that I always do. So first of all, one of the things to consider is some cruise lines in some regions do require a certain level of coverage. So for example, in the UK, if you're in the UK and booking on P&O or Cunard, they have a very specific requirement for travel insurance, which you have to have. And it has quite large limits. I think, don't quote me on the exact number, but it might be 2 million or something like that. To cover it has to be cruise cover specific. Now, if you're booking a P&O or a Cunard outside of the UK, it's highly recommended. If you're going, say, on expeditions, they will normally require you to have insurance and give details of the insurance. So that's the first thing to bear in mind, is to understand if the line has it. But it's quite specific to expedition and the UK, from my understanding. The second critical thing is when you're looking at insurance, make sure that it has cruise cover. So you'll find, some people think, well, I'm covered because I've got it with my credit card or whatever. But check if it has cruise cover. So when I buy my travel insurance, for example, which you're right, it is an annual policy, I have to take out cruise cover as part of it. It's a very small additional premium. Cruise cover then ensures that you're covered for things like medical evacuations and so on. But the other thing to then consider is, what does it really cover? So you want to make sure that you have evacuation, both evacuation from a ship, but also, bear in mind that if you are have a medical issue, you break a bone or you damage yourself or you have some other thing where you have to be, you're taken off the ship into local medical care, that it's very important that your insurance covers that and also covers you getting you home, because the cruise line will not cover that. And it was quite interesting, Michael, because when I was in Japan recently, and I'll cover it in a video I do about cruising in Asia, is they had posters in some of the ports which were about the importance of having medical insurance, and it quoted the prices for if things happen to you. And it was quite interesting. The example they gave was, you're out in port and you break something, an arm or an ankle or whatever, and you have to then get disembarked and you have to go into Japanese medical care. You spend some time in the hospital on observation. But they were talking about it costing like $200,000 to have that treated. So, you want to make sure that you have a fairly sizable coverage for medical issues. The other thing that you may want to look at, which I'm personally less concerned about, but I know other people are, is I always try to look if you can cancel for any reason. That becomes quite important because sometimes you just want to cancel. Most insurance policies will include things like if you fall ill or there's a death in the family or stuff like that. But if you can get cancelled for any reason, that's quite a good one, because if you have to change your mind or just plans or life changes, also, so that becomes very important that you take out insurance at the time that you book. That's very important as well, so that you're covered if you need to cancel. So a lot of people kind of wait closer to the time. That's the advantage of having an annual policy. But you want to see if it's got cancelled for any reason. That's a big plus. You also want to see whether it covers you for missed ports. So often the cruise lines will not compensate you for missing ports, but some travel insurance policies will give you some compensation if you're kind of missing ports. When it comes to cancellation, one of the things that I probably didn't do very well was looking at how much they'll cover. So, particularly if you're going on expensive trips, you need to have quite a high level of cancellation coverage. So I have recently upped that. So if I do cancel a trip, it is largely largely covered. And the other critical thing, of course, is making sure that you declare all of your pre-existing conditions, because one of the loopholes, I guess, for travel insurance policies is finding that you haven't declared something. So I use more specialist providers because I have pre-existing conditions with my being in remission from cancer and so on. Now I have seen, and I don't know the answer to this, but I have seen some discussions in the press recently about if one is on, a Manjaro, a Zempic, those kind of things, is whether you need to declare that. Now, some people are obviously on it for more medical reasons. Some people are more just as part of a weight loss program. But also it's important to understand if you are on that, that's you remember to declare things like that. So if you're on statins or whatever. So I think those are the main things. The reason I'm raising the Manjaro issues, some people had claims turned down because they hadn't declared it with some policyholders. Hopefully that helps a bit. And I probably should do a video on insurance because they do get asked a lot. I'm just kind of nervous about it, I guess. People often ask you, by the way, for specific recommendations, and you'll find that travel companies are quite local. So in the US, a lot of people speak very highly of Allianz, for example. I'm not sure where you're based, Michael. Claudia, good to see you here. Considering ditching ship Wi-Fi for gig Sky on my Celebrity, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand in November. Good idea or glitchy. Want browsing, social media, posting, audiobook, podcast, stream ability. Claudia, first of all, I would double check that it is available on Celebrity, which I think it is because when I did my tests, it was available. I found it pretty okay, but bear in mind they will connect either through Starlink or they will connect through whatever the satellite system is. So it is a little bit reliant also on the ship itself having good technology. So it is piggybacking on that technology. I would certainly give it a go. I would perhaps buy not a huge package, and so you haven't committed too much money, because it's very easy to top up and see how it goes. Obviously, I haven't experience in that part of the world, but I'm assuming Celebrity with Starlink. I'm assuming they're going to back on the back of that, but definitely gig style. Now, Claudia, the other thing is there are a couple of US providers like AT&T and a few like that also offer kind of packages as well. But gig side, definitely I would consider that, but don't go all in if you like. Andrew, good to see you here, Andrew. I'm planning ahead. Have you done any videos on Saga cruises? Not wishing to be rude, but I think you're now old enough. I've been old enough for Saga for a long time. For those, I guess everybody knows, Sagas is you have to be 50 years or older to go on, or you need to be traveling with someone 50 or older. And I think you still have to be over 40 even if you're traveling with someone. So Andrew, yes, I have done videos on Saga, not for a while, but I have done videos on Saga. I have done some on their older ships, which are less relevant now because they're out of service, but I've done some around Spirit of Discovery. I haven't been on Spirit of Adventure. Very nice ships. The average age tends to be older. Like I would still be a youngster, certainly on the ones that I've been on. It tends to skew kind of older, 70, and so it's kind of I guess it's probably average age, because obviously with they collect you at home, they bundle in travel insurance. That's a real door-to-door. Ships are very nice. Food is very good. Entertainment was pretty good from what I recall. Nice afternoon tea. Very nice cabins. They have lots of solo cabins, but it's quite pricey. But I'm sure you've probably looked at it. So if you go to my channel, I'll maybe try and leave. Let me make a note, Andrew. I'll try to remember at the end of this. I will try and add some links in the show notes after this. So if you wait 10 or so minutes. But if you go to my channel, and you search 50, because I think the video title is something like things I learned and lessons I learned from going over 50. But also if you search Saga, there's a couple of ship tours, if I remember correctly, on the ship there as well. So that's hopefully that helps. But thank you for suggesting that I've already just scraped in to be a Saga person. So Heike's here, Diabetic's here, Jeff is here, which is great. Jeff joined us yesterday on the Captain Zoom, which was great. Let's have a look. Maureen asking one of those hot button questions. Dress code and gratuities are always the hot button questions. So in terms of gratuities, I personally, Maureen, prepay gratuities if they are not included in the fare, to get them out of the way, because I like to kind of get on the ship and know that my bill afterwards is going to be not that great. In reality, because gratuities, gratuities is a misnomer, because then, in fact, very few lines call them gratuities these days, I guess. They call them service charge or crew appreciation, because the pretense that they're actually for service above and beyond is kind of gone. Even the cruise lines admit that it's not anymore for that. So I do tend to prepay them, because then I don't have to worry about it. I do, Maureen, though, I will, not always for everybody, but if I've had an incredible cabin steward or something like that, I will sometimes tip on a little bit on top of that, but not universally. So I do prepay them. So all the cruises coming up, I will prepay them. I also tend, even though it probably doesn't make a lot of sense financially for me, in reality, I often will buy some of those packages, like the Have It All package on Holland America, or the Always Included on Celebrity, Free at Sea on Norwegian, just because it means that I've covered everything. Now I've become a little bit sharper at it. So because the problem is, if you buy Have It All and stuff, they tend to have the alcoholic package. So for example, for a Celebrity cruise, just using Celebrity coming up next year on Silhouette, I've bought some of the other packages because they fit me better. But it means that once I'm on board, there's very little that I will have to do unless I decide to tip on top of the tips, if that makes sense. So it's a long way of answering your question, but yes, I just like to get it out the way rather than have them ramping up once I'm on board. Mitzi Crafts with Friends, good to see you here again. Do you do much land travel? When would you choose a cruise versus land? On land, do you do tour groups or independent travel, hotels, activities booked in advance by travel agents? So this is actually a very nice, timely question, because the answer to it is yes. So next weekend, in fact, we will, where are we today? confusing the day, Sunday. I will be in Las Vegas this time next week and heading on Monday then to Palm Springs for just around about 10 days. We're actually doing a day or two in Los Angeles, distributing back to Palm Springs, back to Vegas and home. So yes, I do land travel, not a lot of land travel. So when do I choose a cruise versus land? So one of the good things about choosing a land trip, Mitzi Crafts, is it forces me in a way to switch off a little bit. So I sometimes try and intersperse it with non-cruise stuff, because even when I go on a cruise for a vacation, if I'm going with Mark, for example, I'll give an example. Last Christmas, we'd booked a cruise, a Panama Canal cruise, and it was like, okay, this is a holiday. I'm not going to record. By the time I'd boarded, that was all gone out the window, and I just ended up doing it. So I choose it partly as a way of making sure that I switch off and do take more of a break. And I choose cruises to land if it beach. So it's really around seeing, actually relaxing, going to the beach. So, for example, we did actually do, when we went to French Polynesia, we did a land portion on that. We have been to Australia. We used to go to, pre-pandemic, most Christmas we go to Australia. So we go to Australia for land-based stuff, which again was about escaping the cold of Europe, the UK, heading down to the Southern Hemisphere and having sort of kind of warmth and stuff. So it's really about relaxing kind of stuff. So in terms of on land, I do very much independent travel. So I don't, I sort of land myself, hotels, travel, tours and stuff. So like, for example, I'll just use this Palm Springs vacation that we're going on. I kind of know what we want to do, and we've booked those all separately. So we want to go to like Sunnylands, we want to go to Pioneer Town, we want to go to Joshua Tree. We've just planned all that ourselves with the hire car. We're actually going to go because we're taking my mother-in-law. So on Los Angeles, we're going to drive to Los Angeles, do a helicopter ride so she can see the Hollywood thing, going to Warner Brothers tour. So that I would all do kind of myself. Now, if I was going somewhere more exotic, I might do that more. So my one big land holiday I did a couple of years, well, actually quite a few years ago, was to Tanzania and a safari that I did through Titan Travel, for example, which they had a guide, because it was all very organized and it was quite complicated and stuff. So I did that. So it's a little bit, if I'm going somewhere like that, I might look at buying more of a package. So hopefully that helps. It was actually really great. I was just before I do land one because I had a good thing. Okay, Tom, I'm going to slightly deflect this one, but I will sort of answer it. What is your current rating and rankings of the ultra luxury cruise line? So I'm working on a video which I've just actually got to tighten down the edit of the script, so that'll be out in a couple of weeks' time. So what I'm doing is I'm doing each of the categories. So already out on the channel is the premium ships one, where I look at those. I have done the mass resort one that's ready. That's going to that just hasn't been released yet. I think that's released the week after next, and the next one to come out will be ultra luxury, and then I will do the luxury small ship ones. So that's sort of based on both a combination of what people are currently rating them at, and also I've been back on all of them in the last couple of years, obviously just back from SilverSea. So I will dive into in much more detail. So my next cruise is actually back on Regent, where I want to just kind of double check a few things. So, I mean, it depends a lot. As I talk about in that video, as you'll see, quite a lot of it talks about, again, what are you looking for? So they are very close with differences. I mean, probably Crystal is probably still king of the crop. If that makes sense. Their ships are a bit older, they're a little bit more old-fashioned, if you like, in some ways. They're very nicely looked after and revamped. But in terms when it comes to service and food, is just fantastic. Probably I would say Regent is the next there. Regent is now more all-inclusive, the most all-inclusive of all of them since SilverSea has adjusted. It's introduced different fare structures, which has caused lots of arguments amongst diehard SilverSea passengers. I think actually I quite like the change. They've stripped out excursions, which I think is actually a plus, because the excursions I think were becoming weaker and weaker. And certainly when I on SilverSea, half the ports end up buying excursions. I think on the plus side, though, SilverSea is very strong if you want, so Regent's is probably a little bit more traditional, although the dress code is not very traditional, but it is a little bit more traditional in many ways. SilverSea is, if you want, they have very huge range of within their fleet, from the very modern, Nova and Ray to the sort of the older Whisper and stuff. But they probably have the most innovative and varied destinations. So if you want kind of slightly more unusual cruises, I think SilverSea probably edge people out. And of course, they have a very, very strong and very good expedition with kind of varied sort of stuff, kind of within it. And then Seabourn, of course, they have a shrinking fleet with Sojourn going soon, so they've reduced capacity. It is probably the most relaxed of all, but has a very more informal kind of thing. But I will dive into much more structure around that. So just watch out for that one. Echo Bravo. I just saw the travel agent Sarah here, who's been going a little bit crazy trying to sort out ultra luxury. There's a repositioning cruise on SilverSea that we've been trying to lock down, and poor Sarah's having a nightmare kind of locking it down, and they keep chopping and changing stuff. So even today on a Sunday, Sarah was battling away trying to solve that for me. So thanks, Sarah. Thanks for joining. Echo Bravo, question. Took our first Cunard cruise on Queen Anne and loved it. We've already booked Queen Elizabeth trip to the Eastern Mediterranean. Will we have a different experience? Well, Echo Bravo, not really. If anything, you'll probably have a more Cunard experience in a way, because Queen Anne decor is quite different, as you probably know, to like a Queen Elizabeth, Queen Victoria. Personally, I will prefer Queen Elizabeth, Queen Victoria, and of course Queen Mary too, which is distinctive. I actually prefer that as a ship. It feels to me it's just more Cunard. It's more traditional, the heavy sort of Art Deco look, but the fundamental structure will be the same. Now, I'm not sure if you're in Britannia, Princess, or Queen's Grill, but certainly I think the Britannia dining room is way grander, way more kind of magnificent in a way, if you like. But the actual stuff will be very similar. So you actually the Queen's room is way better. Some of the facilities are better as well. But you will still have your 4 enrichment speakers. You will have the afternoon tea thing. You will have the dancing at night, the ballroom dancing, etc., etc., etc. So you'll find it very, very similar indeed. I think you might, if you really liked Cunard, I think you might find it even nicer. It's a smaller ship, fewer people, and I think that's also a plus as well. Personally, for me on Cunard, for me it's all about Queen Mary too. So the next Cunard I've got is next year, transatlantic, and I think it's going to be interesting to see where Cunard go. They're still wrestling about what they want to do. Do they want to dial back the dress code? Don't they want to dial back the dress code? And so on. Donna W. Have you been to North Norway at the end of October? At the end of October. I'm trying to think of the latest in the season that I've been. No, I haven't been that late. 4 weeks to my first ever cruise. Fantastic. Wondering about clothing. So certainly, October will start to get chilly. I mean, Europe's becoming quite rapidly more chilly. So the key thing I would say is layers, layers, layers. Make sure you've got a good, good layers. Hat probably, gloves, scarf, nice, good puffy coat. But have it as layers, because if you do get sort of less seasonal weather, but it's starting to get really chilly. I mean, I was saying it's kind of sunny, but it's kind of a little bit cool out here. But certainly, of course, being much north, so prepare kind of for chilly, cold, kind of very autumnal kind of sort of weather. That would be my key. Oren, my wife and I booked to do our first SilverSea cruise from Seward to Japan. So that's basically what I've just recently done. Do you have any recommendations for the company to enhance experience given? Oh, you know that. Do you have any recommendations for the company to enhance experience given your recent trip? Okay, I'm not quite sure if I understand that, but I'm guessing you mean just generally in terms of that. The thing I would say, Oren, is when you book SilverSea now, depending on when you booked it, because these new fares have come in, and so they're all after a certain date. So I'm guessing you've probably booked it before the fares came in, because they've only just come in. So one thing I'll say is when you book you can go in from the minute you book and choose your included excursions. I would strongly encourage you to go in and do that if you've got the fare where you've got the included excursions, and lock those down. And look at the ones, doing the included and excluded. What I would also strongly encourage is, if it's similar to what I've done, where you've got the 8 Japanese ports, is try to make sure that you build in diversity of excursions. Some of the mistake that people make when they go to Japan is they end up basically just going to look at temples, and it becomes a bit repetitive. So do try and build a bit of diversity, which probably means you're going to have to book some additional charge excursions. Now, if you're on the new system, that's even easier, because if you're on the all-inclusive plus, you've got some credit for shore excursions. If you're on the all-inclusive, you just buy those. The other thing to bear in mind, Oren, is that in most of the ports, in all of the ports, Japan has done a very good job at making self-exploring much easier. So you'll find incredibly good tourist desks at every port, very well manned. So even in some, we went to one port, and my mind's gone blank on it, which wasn't a normal port for people to call in, but even there they had a stall there with help. So you could explore a little bit more if you wanted to, so that they will give you, make sure, and the ship will give you as well on the daily program, they'll have the name of the port in Japanese. You can obviously use fantastic things like the Google Translate app is fantastic. You just hold up the camera and it will translate what things mean. You can also do audio stuff. So even if you do that, but so don't be scared necessarily of self-exploring. So I did 1 or 2 self-exploring ports. The other thing that I would say is, if you're doing the similar to me, you had this sort of sea days, but then it was port. So also just think about pacing yourself. You might decide 1 or 2 days, just do some kind of self-exploring, or give yourself kind of a day off. So the other thing to do is when make a note of when dining becomes available, and jump in when it does, particularly if you like to eat at peak times. That's really important. The other thing I'd say, if you are on Silver Nova or Silver Ray, if you're doing that same thing, is bear in mind that there is a number of extra charge dining, but I would focus like on Kaiseki, which is the Asian restaurant, go at lunchtime, because you don't pay. If you go at night, it's $80. The program is fairly repetitive. So I sort of made a joke, and I will in the video that comes out about this, because I'm making a video about this, so that will come. So I sort of knew, certainly on those sea days, exactly what was happening every day. So it's not a hugely diverse thing, but people, trivia was rammed full, bingo was rammed full. The speakers, obviously varying based on what they've got on, but also when you get on board, although I believe now that they're doing it in advance, is have a look at if you can book the Salt Kitchen classes online. I did read somewhere that they've started to do that now. For me, you could only do it on board, but when you get on board, kind of lock those in, because they don't charge for them, and people sort of lock in and lock them all in. The seas can be rather bumpy when you cross the Bering Sea, so make sure that if you do not wild about motion, or you do a little bit prone to motion sickness for those couple of days, that you've done whatever you need to do. So I've probably got better things, but certainly in the video, hopefully I will cover those as well. Cruising Engineer, hi, good to see you there from New Mexico. Any updates on the 2026 Panama Canal Group Cruise? There's not a lot of updates. What I'm going to wait for, what I will be doing is, as you probably know, the final payments for the group cruise are on I think it's the 9th of October, something like that. So once I'm back from this trip, I will do more updates. But we have been working, mostly I've been asking Sarah, who's been liaising with Holland America. We've put in our requests for all of the stuff, the program that we want to do with, the meetups, the afternoon tea event, the evening drinks, the dining arrangements, all that sort of stuff. So we put all those requests in, complicated spreadsheets and all sorts of stuff. So we put all those requests in. Some of them they can't confirm till closer to the time. The one thing which they said an absolute no to, which I can't remember who I did post about, we had asked, because they've reintroduced those fantastic behind-the-scene tours. They're quite expensive. We were trying to get one dedicated for our group, but that was a no-go. So things like that, when people get on board, they have to zoot in. So I will do more updates closer to, once we get the final numbers in. At the moment, we have, because it's all closed now, and we've actually booked more than we had originally planned to book. As of today, we have 82 people, I think, with a couple of cancellations coming in, maybe a few more before final payments. And 25% of the group will be solos. I know you won't be solo, but there's quite a big solo group there. So there will be some updates coming, certainly, once you get past that and as we get more stuff in. And then I'll do things like we'll start to launch like the WhatsApp group, and I will start to get into kind of really much more regular updates as we head in. So hopefully that answered that. I need to take a slug of tea. Travel agent Sarah is heading off on Silver Endeavour, which I'm very envious of, on an expedition voyage. The Chilean voyage, of course, Silver Endeavour is just absolutely gorgeous. So that's why I'm driving her slightly crazy at the moment with all my plans for 27 and stuff going on. But and she's having lots of fun doing that, I'm sure. So let's have a look. Kelly, I'm not sure I can actually answer this question, unfortunately, but maybe someone else can. So Kelly is sailing from Piraeus. So that's, for those who don't know, is the port for Athens. My hotel is, I can never pronounce this correctly, is it Syntagma Square, which I know where that is. I'm mobile with my spinner bag. Is taking the Metro M3 to the last stop and then a taxi to the cruise terminal a decent plan? Kelly, I have never taken the Metro to the port. I've always got a taxi or booked transfer. So if anyone has if anyone's done this route, let me know, because you're right, it's quite a long trek down there. And often I've done it, I think it's been more linked in a package, or I've done it through the cruise line or stuff. I can't really remember. So I haven't done that. So if anyone has, I'd love to know, because it's good to know for me for future reference. Lucy Mum saying, wishing you good luck on the Wave Awards. My only 2 nights. So the Wave Awards, as you probably know, is a voted for thing. I have been a finalist in the Wave Awards. I think I've counted at least 6 years or something, and I've never won it. Part of the thing is because it is a voting one, so you have to kind of cajole and keep asking people to vote. And I haven't really done that. I do one post at the beginning, but I will do another post. It just came up on my to-do list, do another post. So I will do that. But thank you very much for that, and enjoy your thing. Maureen, another question: is annual cruise insurance policy worth it when only cruising locally as well as more worldwide, only 2 to 3 times a year? Maureen, for me, certainly it works. It's always worth looking at the price, because sometimes you'll find if you're buying them individually, certainly I'm guessing you're in the US, but I don't know why I'm assuming the US. Someone's telling us in spelling, but anyway, so for me, it works out better. Now, obviously, I cruise quite a lot, but you often find if you're doing it a couple of times a year, it does. So, for example, Mark, because he's working full time and he travels maybe 2 or 3 times a year max, and it worked out cheaper to get an annual policy than buying them ad hoc. And the advantage was that if it did add any things or cancel any things, it was kind of all encompassing. You don't have to worry about juggling to and fro. Elizabeth Hurley, I always like that. I always joke about it. I'm sure Elizabeth Hurley, with that name, gets lots of doors opened, hopefully. Becky, what activities are good for 18 to 25-year-olds on Enchanted Princess for New England, Canada in October? Becky, there's not anything really specific laid on for that age group, but Princess is pretty, these days, their daily program of certainly of all those premium lines is normally the most chock-a-block. So there's certainly a lot going on, but it is very much around quiz shows, trivia. There's lots of that going on. The movies on the deck is also a good option. They will tend to, they'll show quite recent movies, or they'll skew a little bit based on the kind of the age profile on board. There will be sort of karaoke nights. in Princess Live, if they're into that. There will be a couple of dance party kind of stuff. There's late night dancing in kind of the Vista Lounge, but it is probably not necessarily their kind of music kind of age. So but it is quite a busy program. So if they're happy to get down into trivias and quizzes and that sort of stuff, there is quite a lot going on. It's quite packed, and it does tend to run a little bit later into the evening. So you will find there's people up and about, and there's kind of an energy around it. So I think that would be good. Sarah just stressing the point about the weight loss drugs. Oh, okay, Elizabeth, what is the difference between a cabin steward and a butler? And what are the different requests you can ask of each? So Elizabeth, let's talk, we'll talk about it. So let's assume, I'm assuming you're asking if you're on a line which has both, where you have a butler and you have a cabin steward. So if you're on if you're on SilverSea, for example, you'll have both, or if you're on Cunard Grills, Queen's Grill or whatever. So basically the cabin steward in that situation where you have both, the cabin steward's real job is to keep the cabin clean. So their job is effectively cleaning the cabin. So, refreshing the towels, sorting out the bed, making the bed, so that's really their job. They won't do any of those kind of tasks that, they won't do things. So let me talk about what the butler will do. So what the butler's job is to really kind of look more after your kind of specific needs. So they will do things like, for example, laundry. So when you put your laundry out, it's the butler that would normally deal with taking the laundry away. If you're on a ship without that, the cabin steward would normally do that. The butler will, if you want to, on some lines, on most lines, would theoretically pack and unpack for you. Some people use that. I don't know why, because I have my own system. They will also sort out normally things like your mini bar. So, because if you're on a line, often if you've got often drinks are included. So if you're on Cunard, drinks aren't included, but you can choose certain things in your mini bar at a setup at the beginning. Also, the other lines, I think on some of the Princess, if you've got no, let me not quite say, I don't know. So they will sort out kind of your mini bar, your drinks. Also, normally what will happen is if you order room service and you have a butler, it's the butler that will bring the room service and set it up. So you might phone room service, but the butler will actually do it. Also, what you can get the butler to do often is set up, if you've got the kind of little quirky things. So for example, I know on SilverSea, I didn't do it, but people did, is they would say like every day, can you make sure I've got such and such, or when I'm out on excursion, when I come back, I want a sandwich and a ginger ale or something, I don't know. Or what I did, because you could order, if you canapes are done by request, so I could say the butler, could I have canapes today, or could I have caviar today, or whatever. The butler will normally also then sort out your reservation. So if you want a spa reservation, a dining reservation, or could even liaise and sort out your shore excursions. Of course, these days, now that everything's kind of on the app, you normally just do it on the app anyway, but they kind of look after those kinds of things. Now, in some lines, you can also ask them to do some zooty, set your bubble bath or something like that. But they're really going to look after your kind of your needs and your bookings and that sort of stuff. Now, if you go on, if you're on a line, so for example, when I was on Seabourn and I went on their expedition ship Pursuit, we actually had two cabin stewards. There were a senior cabin steward and junior cabin steward. And the cabin steward did some of those things, like they would sort out the mini bar, sort out the laundry, but they wouldn't do those kind of bookings things that you had to sort out yourself. Elizabeth, hopefully that helps. I have a video, very old video, based on what butlers do, from some interviews I did with the butler, and observations. And I have in my notes to keep updating it, but I haven't really done it. One of the things that was very helpful when we were on Cunard, I think it was on Queen Anne, I think it was on Cunard, they had a little document which said what they did and didn't do. So maybe I should probably dig that out and post that somewhere. Hopefully that answers your question. Melanie saying that the genetic exist preconditions. I would, that may be true, but it's unusual if that's true, because normally you have to. So again, I guess the point is always check if you have to declare them. Brenda, I'm booked on the Viking Pharaohs and Pyramids cruise for Thanksgiving week. Any crucial tips I should be aware of before my trip? So Brenda, what I would say, my biggest tip is watch my videos about the Nile River cruise. I didn't do Viking, I did Waterways. So if you go to the channel and just search Nile, and I have 2 videos there, one of which is specifically about the experience I had, another is diving into tips. So that will really talk in detail about those tips. And there's quite a lot of them, to be honest. So I think you'll find that very helpful, because I do talk through a little bit about eating and dining to make sure you avoid getting the sort of reputation that Egypt has. It's things like always making sure that you're using bottled water, that you always have you're checking that the caps are always sealed, so don't buy waters from vendors or stuff. Kind of focus on the ship. Obviously, stay hydrated. I actually avoided salads and things because they're often washed with water, which is very unusual for me to avoid salad. Then there's more things about, there are you have to be quite cautious about, depending where you're going. But Viking will steer in the right direction, what you're taking pictures or not taking pictures of. You'll go through various security, armed forces and military and stuff. And you need to be careful that you're not seen as taking pictures of them or taking pictures of what could be seen as security issues. But that's more an issue perhaps when you're in Cairo a bit around that. But Viking will guide you on that. Offhand, I'm sure that there's loads of ones. So my biggest tip would watch those videos. Again, what I'll try and do, Brenda, is I will try and put it when this is finished at the end. I'll try and put links to my Now videos in that note below. Melly asking me, I don't know, cancel. Yes, I am in remission. I've been in remission, much to my consultant's surprise, since 2012. And I have 6 monthly checkups with them and so on. Rhonda, we're doing a transatlantic crossing with Explorer. Very nice. Do you know if they have detergent in their laundry room? They don't have free laundry for penthouse suites like other cruise lines. Rhonda, I don't. I can't remember. I could probably have a look on my video clips of the laundry and to see whether it had it in there. I don't know, because I didn't use the laundry when I was on. I didn't go to the laundry. I didn't put laundry through the laundry room when I was on. I'm trying to think what I did, because I was on for 10 days. Maybe I took enough clothes. Did I use the laundry? I didn't go to the laundry room. I'm trying to remember if I sent away laundry. So I don't know, but if anyone does know, I would assume that they do, but I will try and see if I can pick that up from my video clips, if that helps. Let's have a look. Heidi, I don't know the question offhand. Which ships can't go to Santorini? We had a Princess cruise booked, but I've heard this Princess someone's not allowed to go there, so we changed on Celebrity Clips. Is this ship good? Heidi, I don't know. But you're right, there are restrictions on I don't think it's probably less about the number of the specific ships, but what happens is the itinerary that becomes key, because there is a cap on how many people can go per day. So, so if, Celebrity Eclipse is due to go on a day where there's a lot of other ships due to go, they may be the one that get bumped or decide to get bumped. So it's not ship specific. It's how many ships are due to go there. So what I would do, Heidi, is one of the ways of having a look is, first of all, obviously keep an eye on the itinerary. But if you go to a site called cruisetimetables.com and go to Santorini and have a look at the date that you're due to be there, and have a look how many other ships are currently scheduled to be there. That's probably the best way of getting a sense of is a lot of ships due to go there. But my understanding, and if anyone knows anything better, then please do shout. I mean, Sarah might know the answer to that, but I feel like it's that's right from what I remember. So Emma Cruz is here, as I mentioned earlier. Hadn't seen Sarah for a very long time. Good to see Emma on here. Boca Boys, eager to see large luxury comparisons video. Yes, yes, hopefully we do. They have a different ranking, and that's always the great thing, is people have different kind of rankings. SilverSea is #1. I know you're big fans of SilverSea. I wouldn't put SilverSea as #1, but anyway, I'll dive into that more in the video. So, but I know for a lot of people, SilverSea is absolutely #1, and they actually are the biggest in terms of. I mean, ultra luxury is very small as a percentage, less than 1% of passengers actually go on it. But they are the largest, also they have the largest fleet and the most diverse fleet for sure. Let's have a look. Yes, seaborne is definitely kind of challenging. Gary, considering off-season cruise to Turkey, choices November, December, and January. Okay, options of Viking or Ocean Allura. Any comments? So Gary, a lot of it is around what do you want to get from the experience in Turkey. So if you want to get a really deep dive into the history and the sort of the cultural side of Turkey, I would lean towards Viking on the basis that they have, on all their cruises, they'll have a resident historian, they'll have another speaker. They will really deep dive into the region. They will, and very high quality speakers. So if that's really important to you, that would be key. Again, obviously other things, it's 18 only. You probably at that time of year, probably not going to get many families. I mean, December time, I mean, it is school holiday time, but I'm guessing probably Turkey out of season is probably not going to be high on families list. But if that's important to you, that's a consideration. Guaranteed, none there. So if that's really important to you, I mean, in terms of Ocean Allura, obviously you have the attraction that it's a new ship. They have more dining options than Viking do. Generally speaking, probably the food is a little bit more elevated, but certainly more choice. You have more passengers. So Viking is a smaller ship. It's 930, if I remember correctly. Allura is 1,200. So you do have a slightly more intimate experience. Certainly, if I was going off season in Turkey, because I guess you're not going for beaches and sun and whatever, you're going for more of the cultural side. I personally would probably lean a little bit more towards Viking for that itinerary out of season. Becky asked me, how old do you need to be on one of your group cruises? Old enough to cruise. So I guess there are rules, and if I don't know what the rules are. I know there's some rules some of the cruise lines changed rules where you couldn't be traveling by yourself unless you were 21 or something, whatever. But there's no specific age limit at the bottom end or the top end for that. So let's have a look. So Alan throwing a few bits of Japanese tips in, which is great. Stein Volt Matt Chen. How is the sea condition and Wi-Fi coverage for your Trans-Pacific crossing? Do you recommend your ship or something bigger? How this cross? So hopefully you probably heard me talk about it. It was a little bit bumpy, it was quite windy. So some days, some of the decks were sort of closed. You couldn't really go outside. We did have some quite foggy days, some quite rainy days, sort of in that middle stretch as you're crossing there. So it was quite bumpy. I of course love that. It was interesting because a lot of the crew kept saying, how are you coping? It's like, I'm loving it. But I guess they were checking on how people were doing. And that's, so that was a little bit bumpy, but only that for a couple of days. Wi-Fi coverage with Starlink was very good. So it was good. I'd paid for the streaming package and I was able to do the video calls, the streaming. SilverSea did this bizarre thing, which I don't really understand, and it really annoys people, but they Wi-Fi is included, but they restricted when they introduced Starlink, they restricted what you can do. So theoretically, you can't do video calls and stuff like that. You have to buy the streaming package. But I was able to stream. I actually uploaded a Patreon video when I was in the middle of the middle of the sea days, and that was all fine. So do I recommend or something bigger? How Vista class? So is that because you're concerned about the movement or whatever? So I think I like the smaller ship, so that was a 700 passenger. I think we had 600 and something. It wasn't completely full. I thought it was great, but you're right. You have 6 or 7, or some of them I've looked at actually 8 sea days. So you need to be sure that you're going to be comfortable on the ship. There's going to be enough for you to do, or you're going to be able to occupy. The advantage, I guess, of the Vista class, a little bit bigger. There's going to be more venues, probably more entertainment, more choice of music venues and stuff like that. Bigger shows, stuff like that. So I think it's probably more combination around, because the sea is going to bounce you around a bit anyway, whether you're bigger or not, in reality. So it's more around, I think, if from an entertainment perspective, On Silver Nova, it was very much, talks, bingo, trivia, and sort of song and dance. Because bear in mind that the cruise is too long for the number of production shows, so they got some of the production singers to do their own cabaret stuff to kind of fill the gaps, as it were. The same would be true on the Hull Business Class. They only have so many production shows they have within their repertoire. So it's a little bit around, I think, what you want, as it were. Let's have a look. Oh, well, it's Walters here, which is great. That's one of the travel agents I recommend in the US. Oh, good point. Walt's making the point that Viking has no casinos. So if the casino is really important to you, do not go on Viking on the Turkey thing. That's a really good point. Martin, yes, I have a video coming out as well around repositioned cruises. I get asked about a lot. I do have an older video, but that's when I'm just finalizing this week, getting the edit done. But there is a site called repositioningcruise.com. It's run by Vacations to Go. It's a spin-off site. It's pretty comprehensive, but not massively comprehensive. It doesn't cover all of the lines, which is kind of interesting because on Vacations to Go it is. But the simplest one is to go to repositioningcruise.com. It's a good starting point. Of course, then if you just look, you can even search on Vacations to Go. If you're searching kind of April time, March, April, and you search sort of September, October, November time, or October, November time, you put a thing around 10 days or more, that will basically flag up most of the repositioning cruises. Some of the lines do have repositioning pages, like Celebrity, if you're really specific about Celebrity, for example. And some you will see, if you say you want to go on Celebrity, you'll find one of the drop-down options is repositionings or trans-Pacific, transatlantics or reposition, I don't know what they call it. But you'll find some cruise lines will give that as an option. Boca Boys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the transatlantic versus trans-Pacific, aside from the obvious. We've done the transatlantic twice and love it, our third book. So it's interesting. I mean, I personally lean towards the trans-Pacific. So although saying that next year I have 2 repositioning cruises booked transatlantic. So the trans-Pacific, just for me, which is probably linked to a point of the obvious, just because of the exotic side of it. So I loved, in fact, one I've actually booked for 27, spends more time in Alaska and more time in Japan as well. So, because for me, those are 2 kind of iconic places that I really want to see. So you do have more sea days. So one of them, I think, is like 7 or 8 sea days. So obviously versus transatlantic, it's longer. So of course, it's more time commitment. You definitely probably have more bumpy seas than you have on transatlantic, and at transatlantic, depending when you go, can be a little bit at the beginning or end, depending which way you're going, can be a little bit bumpy. But it is kind of a more elongated sea days thing. The trips are longer, so they are a longer commitment, both time and money. And as we mentioned a little bit, could be a little bit repetitive with the daily program and stuff. But but obviously the cost is a bigger consideration, because for most people, you've got a long haul flight, say to Alaska, you've got a long haul flight back from Japan. It is quite. It didn't bother me as much, but the time difference is quite big. You've already changed, say, to get to Alaska, like I went from Seattle, you've already changed it 1 hour, but then there was a 7 hours had to change because you lose a day also with the international dateline going that way. So from Alaska that way. So a lot of people were struggling because in the space of 7 days, you went, so people were waking up really early because they were putting the clock back. And so people were always kind of rattling on the doors of La Veranda, before the buffet opened, because people had been up so long. So some people will struggle a bit with the day. If you're in the other way, it's pretty tiring because you're losing an hour every day. Whereas obviously on the transatlantic, you've got the 5 hours. So you sort of got that there. I think that's probably the key difference. They're both great. They're both absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So I think you should give that a go. I think you should give that a whirl. And certainly on SilverSea do them really well, as you mentioned earlier. Cullen Johnson, we're taking the train from Chicago to Seattle next week and back home after the cruise. do you have any advice for long train trips? So I've only done long train trips I've done, Colin, is only those more scenic ones, like Roberts Rail in South Africa and the Guyana in Australia, in the Pacific. So those are broken up. You do have stops. So I've never done, except when I was a kid, where we did a 3-day train from Harare all the way down to Durban. I think it was 3 nights on the train, and that was literally just the train going. So I don't have any other than maybe load up your iPad with Netflix and Amazon Prime, and just use it as a chance to kind of unwind. But if people have better tips than I do, or more experience of that, I'm just trying to think, because Trek Trendy, he does a lot of train stuff, but he's never done a specific tips one, I don't think. So that was probably a bit rubbish. So if anyone has better tips than I did, then please put those in. Tom, we're on Crystal Symphony leaving Lisbon 2 weeks. Fantastic. So I guess you're on before the refit. Met someone else. In fact, you might be on the same. On Friday, I did a video, I did a podcast. I was on a podcast recording for the Sail Away magazine guys, and Ritzy Travel Guide, Bill, was on that, and he's on Crystal Symphony. I feel like he might be on your sailing as well. So that's why it's pre-refit, because they're refitting Crystal Symphony quite soon, where they're taking the fountain out, playing around with the bar, updating some of the decor, redoing some of the cabins that haven't been redone, and a lot of back office stuff. So any special items we should plan? White party, I forgot to take stuff for the white party. That was probably the only thing, but I don't think there's anything specific, because presumably you've got your reservations kind of locked in. Bear in mind that you can go to the Nobu, to the sushi thing without reservations if you get in there early. But I think it's really just making sure you've locked down those kind of video, is that how you pronounce it? And your Nobu Uma stuff. But no, dress code is not particularly strict or anything on that. Very envious. That'll be fantastic. That'll be really fantastic. Let's have a look. Michael, I noticed you recommend getting the best deal on a cruise when they're first announced. Absolutely. What about booking your next cruise while on board? Recommended. Yes. So what I do, for example, Michael, so one of the things I did, for example, what SilverSea were doing is they're releasing their new itineraries in October. So what you could do when you're on board is you could pay, so it was $500 or in my case it was £300, and that would lock in the extra 5% discount, plus the ability to also, I think, change at least your cruise once without penalty, for example. So I bought that with the idea that when the new itineraries are released, that I would be able to then jump on that. In reality, what I've done, as I mentioned earlier, is I just found there's actually repositioning from Papeete to Vancouver, which was very nicely and sharply priced at the moment, because they were doing a 30% off promotion. So actually I'm using it for that, because repositionings tend to be a harder sell because of those sea days. So yes, but what you can do, Michael, is sometimes what you can do, what you can do is definitely book, because you're going to get 5%. In fact, at the beginning of the cruise on SilverSea, they're offering 10% off, which is very high. And that's 10% on top of any other deals. So, and I know one of the clients of Where's Walter, who was on board, she had booked a very nice trip by being able to combine, the deep discounts and the promotions and get a very attractive deal. So it is worth doing, but particularly if they're going to be releasing new stuff. So I booked, for example, talking transatlantics a bit earlier. So when I was on board Crystal, I went to see the Future Cruise people because I wanted to do transatlantic and a repositioning, sorry. And repositioning you can normally get deals on it, but on board, they were able to bundle a whole bunch of things. There was a promotion running, which was you could book a cabin and get an upgrade. So I could book a regular cabin and get a suite, but they then had other things they were offering on board. They were offering some pre-stay night or some credit. They had an extra discount. They had no solar supplement. So they can there's sometimes kind of offers that are bundled on there, but particularly what's interesting is most of them will sell you a certificate. So if you know that they're going to be releasing any sailings coming up, buying that certificate is a good way of then kind of double dipping if that's. Greatly appreciate just when you take on gratuities that further the guild's economy. I'm not quite sure what you mean by tipping on top. Tipping is always it was always now. We even had a chat yesterday on dress codes that got us kind of into a whole like mindset as well. So I don't know if I quite understood your point about the gratuities, but hopefully I have. Debbie, any tips for Alaska? All the trips look very touristy. I would like to do something more authentic. Yes, Debbie. So what you can do is there is a couple of options. There is a cruise line called Uncruise. So their ships are a little bit more rustic, I guess you could argue, but they don't tend to call on those more touristy places. They're very small ships. There's a little bit more wildlife focused, quite small. I can't remember the numbers. It's quite small. But also then you'll find Hurtigruten, for example. No, sorry, not called Hurtigruten. HX Expeditions. They run a more expedition-focused Alaska trip where they don't call on the big ports. It's more zodiac stuff and it's more wildlife focused. So those are two that kind of come to mind. I think also Victory might go there as well, if I remember correctly. But those are the two that I know, and I know people who have done the Uncruise. They loved it. It's not your traditional cruise line. So those are the two that I would certainly have a look at. I feel like possibly Seabourn are taking some of their expedition ships there, but I might be getting my wires a bit crossed there. Let's have a look. We're wrapping around out of time, but let me just see if I can quickly get some other questions in before I wrap up. Have you been on a ship prior to being taken off service, thinking of booking on Region Navigator, which I believe is its last setting? I haven't, but particularly if a ship is being sold off or whatever, there is a risk that there's kind of starting to do stuff. I mean, what's interesting with Navigator, for those who don't know, is becoming part of Crescent Seas. It's going to be converted into a residential ship. So I was due to be on Navigator in October. I actually canceled that for other reasons. And doing a different routing, but often it's a big celebration. So when I've spoken to people being on it, it's often a big end of a experience. Now Navigator is going to then go and have a major refit and being converted. So I would be surprised if they're going to be starting to strip stuff out. There's a small risk they are, but it's normally going to be a celebration. I would have thought Regent are going to make a big deal of that, but I've not been on that. I haven't, Madeline, I haven't made Miami to night to prior to your 35th January cruise. Any suggestions, or will do that what I have in past cruise? Oh, so Marilyn's asking, I guess, about hotels are quite expensive that night. So I normally say kind of the Intercontinental. It was obscenely priced. There seems to be some stuff going on. So Sarah had, I think, made some suggestions. Maybe what we'll do when we send some updates just after it closes, we'll have a look at make some suggestions on hotels and stuff around that. So I have sort of penciled in staying in Intercontinental with my sisters coming on the group cruise. So we both booked in there, but the price is just crazy. I know Sarah has booked more on South Beach stuff. So maybe we'll have a look and try and have a look at those. People are talking about Kimpton. I said the Kimpton before because I try to stay at Intercontinental because of keeping status. Walter's got some suggestions. I'm trying to think. There was an interesting one which La Vida Loca. So Tony from La Vida Loca stayed at. So I'm trying to remember the name of that. It's quite small, but quite interesting as well. But we will maybe make some more suggestions there. Let me wrap up because we're churning through. Richard asking, does Allura have thin wall noises? I don't know yet. I guess the ship's just coming into service, but hopefully they have addressed that. So lots of tips coming on for the hotel. So thanks for that as well. Thanks for joining me now. Let's talk a little bit about next week. So next week I will be traveling on Sunday on Saturday. Sunday, I think in Las Vegas we've got some plans in the morning, so I probably will not do one on Sunday. So keep an eye out. What I'm thinking of doing is actually experimenting with doing a early week one, so possibly on the Tuesday of next week. But the week after that, we'll definitely be doing one, but it'll be on Saturday. So keep an eye out for it. I will post about that, but I might experiment, as I said, with the week after next. So definitely not next weekend because I'll be traveling. I won't be able to do that, but keep an eye out for it and we'll experiment and see how a weekday one goes. I'll probably shift it a little bit later. So, because I understand that people may be working and so on. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for all the fantastic questions. Have a great rest of the weekend, whatever you're doing, and see you soon, hopefully.